comparing yourself to others and feeling worse off for the comparison? Well, you've landed on the right episode of Me and My Health Up. I'm your host, Anthony Harcher. I'm a clinical nutritionist and lifestyle medicine specialist. And in today's episode, we are covering how to discover your joy and self-love. Love for self, yes. And it all begins with self-acceptance, and love for who you are, because you are unique, a completely unique, special human on this planet Earth. And before I get underway with what I'm going to share today, the purpose of this podcast is to enhance and enlighten your well-being. And that's what I strive to do every episode, is to really take your well-being to another level. Health up. So let's get into this episode of finding your inner joy and self-love, love for self, how to boost that self-esteem, how to boost your self-confidence, and ultimately how to have a more fulfilling life. So where does all this come from? Where does this lack of joy or lack of self-love come from? It very much stems from our comparison to others and looking at others and admiring features that you like about them. Physical features, physical traits is essentially what you're admiring in them, and not seeing the inner beauty and the outer beauty of yourself. You're looking at theirs and admiring theirs, but you're not seeing it in your own eyes about yourself. And so this episode is all about discovering the inner joy and the outer beauty of yourself without comparison. I certainly have a personal story to share. I grew up as a little kid, and as I was growing up, I was constantly told how ugly I was. And as a growing kid, you want the best, right? You seek the best and want to be popular and want to stand out for your looks and your abilities and really show your self-worth in that sense and show that you're valuable and important. And that's, an inspiring thing as being a kid and growing up. And certainly I was constantly told from people around me how ugly I was, and I only had a face or a head that a mother could love. And obviously, when I heard that through high school, in particularly teenage years, that was quite, hurt. It was a stab in the back, or a sort of knock in confidence, put it that way. Particularly when you're about to go out with your mates and you hear that from one of the my mates' daughter, not daughters, my mate's sister. And so you're thinking, okay, that's a real knock in self-confidence before you're about to head out in the town. And then I continually got those knocks through university, and it really, it served me well, because what it enabled me to do was realize that it was something I couldn't change, and it was something that I needed to accept. And it took a while for that acceptance. And I'm certainly really good at it now, having received all those knocks and realizing, hey, this is out of my control and it's not something I can do something about. And therefore, I'm going to focus on what I can control. And that is really, my reactions to receiving those comments. Well, rather than reacting and saying a derogatory comment back to the person, was I used to just take it. I thought, well, yeah, that's their opinion. So you're entitled to an opinion. And so I really just accepted what they had to say. And, at the time, certainly it hurt. And I, started to question, like I just can't do anything about that. And it's just frustrating. And as much as I'd love to. And then over the years, like I've just recently read a scientific paper that has concluded in their study that people with beauty that look, really look apart, receive higher salaries. So higher salaries, more income is associated with good looks. And I've also seen published research around being taller. You receive better remuneration. So it's tied to money as well. Beauty and height is also tied to money. And as you can see in advertising, sex sells. It continues to sell well today, even though we have this positive body acceptance and, beauty at all sizes and all those sort of terminology. At the end of the day, sex is still selling, and beauty sells and great bodies sell. So where am I going with this? You're probably wondering. Well, it really comes down to honoring what you like about yourself and being true to yourself. So rather than because what we can do is look at a feature on someone else and not see it in us. But we do have it within us. It's just in another form, another part of the body or somewhere else. And so as much as I didn't have the outer beauty, well, I know I do, because I've received plenty of compliments about my smile. And that's outer. And the smile is something that people remember me. They have a distinct memory about my smile and how much they love my smile. And I must say, I attribute part of my smile to what's happened as a kid, because I just had to accept things and really just give what I had. And one of the trained practices I have is to smile at everyone. And now I don't need to put any attention to it or any conscious awareness. I get smiles all the time, and I'm thinking, how come I'm getting smiles? And it's because I'm constantly have a smile, or I'm constantly giving out a smile. And so today it's very much, I recognize that, but certainly at the time I didn't, but it was always there. I always had a good smile, but because my attention was on what I didn't have. And when you focus on what you don't have, that grows. That focus expands your perception of it and distorts it. It distorts it and makes it even worse. And so you see what you don't have, and you see it in a larger context, in a much distorted context, and it becomes quite a distorted illusion that you have about yourself. And this can lead into body dysmorphia, certainly, is people seeing a part of themselves and then distorting the reality and distorting how bad it actually is. So first of all, you need to have the conscious awareness that you are fixated on something about yourself, and that fixation is coming from a comparison to something else. So it's understanding that it's nothing to do with you, because if you didn't see someone else, you wouldn't know any better, right? If you were just alone in this universe, and you'd have no point of comparison. And so what you would see is just you, and you wouldn't be thinking, oh, I wish I had that nose, or I wish I had those particular shape of eyes and all that. And so one thing that can really help get over this is really, when you're looking in the mirror, obviously, if you're dressing and combing your hair and all that sort of stuff, I don't have that issue today. I don't need to comb my hair, so I rarely look at the mirror. But when I do, I look at my eyes, because when you look at your eyes, you really see the inner beauty. And I think spending more time observing your eyes in the mirror will connect with your heart and soul. And so do that more. And particularly if you're fixated on a particular body part and it's, you exaggerate and get frustrated over it, get back to the eyes and look at your eyes, and you'll see the inner soul, the inner beauty, the inner child. And it's magnificent. And it's the same with other people. When you look into their eyes, you see beauty. And I think we need to have more of that eye contact with self as well as with others. So take that as a tip. So if you're fixated on a body part, go back to your eyes and really connect with you and connect with that soul, that heart, that inner soul, that beauty within. The other thing is, if you're constantly comparing yourself to others, what you want to do is look, okay, if I had that feature, what is the downside of having that feature? And I recently went through this exercise with a client of mine who was in admiration for someone on TikTok. And I said, okay, let's go to the TikTok profile. I think it was Instagram, actually. It was the Instagram profile, and the name was Tina, I think. Tiny Tina, something like that. I said, I just want you to share with me everything that you admire about Tiny Tina. And it probably isn't that, which is probably good. So anyway, this list came out of all the things she admired about Tiny Tina. And I said to her, okay, now I want you to imagine that you have that. And now I want you to look at what would be a drawback of having that. Because often we fantasize how good it would be to have it, but we're not balancing our perception of what it's actually like, the reality of having it. And one of the first things my client came to was that she would get unwanted attention in an area that she doesn't like attention, and that's sexual attention. And so she said, I couldn't handle everyone whistling and yelling out the window and, saying all these derogatory comments and wanting me for the wrong reason, because she doesn't like the sexual attention. And so she's saying, oh, I actually wouldn't like that at all. And I allowed her to sit with that. And she sat with it and thought, no, it's something I just couldn't handle it. It's the worst type of attention. I want attention, other types of attention, but I don't want that sexual attention. And I know if I had this, I'm absolutely certain if I had this feature in my body that I would attract this unwanted attention, and I don't want that. And we eventually went through all the features about this person that she was admiring, and I got her to look at the drawbacks of having those features, and she went through every feature and found drawbacks. And then I started to take her to what she has and look at the upside of what she has. And so she really started getting more self-aware and more consciously aware, so with full consciousness. Because what happens is when we get fixated on a feature, we lose the bigger picture and we're not seeing the whole of what it is. And that's the same as within us. When we look at a particular feature, such as my big nose, then we can distort how big it is by focusing on it. But I'm not seeing the beauty. And I realized, certainly as I started traveling around the world, that the big nose in some cultures is admirable. So you get what I mean? Like, it's really in the eye of the beholder. It's the perception of the beholder and what they like. And I really helped my client find the beauty of what she has and the downside of what she was fantasizing over. And it really helped her to grow that self-acceptance. And it's certainly an exercise that you can apply. It's really easy to apply. And so I recommend next time you're looking into the mirror, if you're distorting a feature about yourself and hating it and comparing it to someone else, then go through the exercise. Think, well, if I had that, what would be the downside of having that to break the fantasy? And then look at what you have and look at what's the benefits, what's the upside. And you'll find it. You will find it when you start looking for it. My client found it very quickly and she expanded her conscious awareness and she's got more self-acceptance. There's way more self-acceptance just from that one session and going through that. And sometimes it can really help to have someone holding you accountable to look for it, because initially, as I'm saying this, you're probably saying there's no benefits. And it's because you've hardwired yourself to have such a strong association with the negatives that it's really hard to then break the pride around you holding on to what you believe and what you believe is true. And it takes time and effort and accountability. And that's what I certainly help my client through, to really find the downside of having that feature and the upside of having what she had. So it's an exercise that you can go through. And as I said, certainly when you're looking in the mirror, to look at those eyes, glare into the eyes and hold the glare into the eyes. And it will be quite touching. You'll start to grow that love for self. And as I said, you'll always have what you're admiring in others in yourself, but it's in a form that's you, right? So we can't be someone else. And yes, you can look around and think that would be great and whatever. But at the end of the day, best thing you can do is love every part of you and feel at one with you and feel that love for you. And when you have that love for you, you'll feel more connected to the world. When we distort parts of ourselves and we fragment ourselves and like this and dislike this, we're breaking ourselves down. We're lowering our self-esteem. We're lowering our self-confidence to a point we feel broken. We feel like we're in parts. And part of what I do in my coaching is bring people together. And it is to integrate them and to love them as they are, to love and to find that, to discover that. And you can do this yourself. And it's really about getting more awareness about the reality as opposed to distorting reality and creating this illusion of who you think you are. Once you get more fully aware of both sides, that yes, every feature has an up and a downside, and it's really about seeing both sides and balancing them. And then you can see it as it is, and then you can be grateful for as it is, because you see it's got ups and downs, but it's completely balanced. And so you want to do this about these features that you're distorting. So even the features you love about yourself, you want to balance your perception about that. I was talking to my client about having a narrow waistline or hips that weren't so wide. And yes, in those early years when you're admiring all those models, they all got very narrow hip lines or, pulled in waist, or that, they've basically got no hips. according to other women. However, if that woman then chooses to then go into having a family and they want a family, then giving birth can be a hell of a lot harder with really close and narrow hips. It's obviously a lot easier when you've got much wider hips for the baby to go through and come out. And so, yes, it's a sort of could be an advantage in the early years, but in the later years, you're less worried about who you are and you want to multiply. And so you're thinking, well, I'd much rather an easier birth. So again, that was always there, that benefit of that hip. It was that later on in life, it would serve you well. And there's plenty of other benefits of having wider hips, and there's benefits of having narrower hips, but there's benefits of both, and there's downsides of both. We just need to broaden our perception and increase our conscious awareness of what we have. And we can only love it once we realize that it has both sides. And when we see things as they are, we're more accepting, as opposed to when we distort it, we don't want it, or we want it so much that we can't live without it. And so we distort the reality, and it really comes down to this unbalanced perception. And what happens is when we judge, so when we judge something, when we judge a part of us or judge someone else, we split our consciousness into what we're consciously aware of and then we become unconscious of the other side. And so we become very fixated on something we admire about someone, and we have a increased conscious awareness of that, but we have lost the other side, and we lose this seeing it as it is, and we have this distortion of reality. And so it's really important that you create that full perception of yourself by looking at both sides. So if you're only seeing the upside of something, then start looking at the downside to give yourself an objective view as opposed to a subjective view. So this is all about increasing your conscious awareness and transcending that consciousness so that you feel more connected with yourself, feel more connected with others, and feel more connected with the universe. And it's all this integration, and this integration requires work. We need to put work in. It's very easy to fragment ourselves and to split our conscious awareness, but it requires work to integrate it. And so I can help you with that work. And in 2025, I'm going to start on my book, which is going to be about this. And it's going to be about discovering joy and realizing happiness. And my whole book is going to be oriented about how we see things, but also in a holistic context, as this podcast is very holistic. It's looking at all areas of life. It's looking at all areas of health. And yes, I'll be talking about mindset, but I'll also be talking about other areas of lifestyle that can really help us feel joy, experience happiness. And so I hope you enjoyed this episode of Me and My Health Up. There'll be certainly more episodes on this topic as I progress through my research in 2025. So certainly stay tuned. I'll be sharing my insights as I go about writing my book, and that's one of my goals for 2025. Given that this episode will launch in the new year in 2025, I want you to think about your goal setting and in regards to that, creating space for new things that you're bringing in or you really want to achieve. And so, for example, I'm creating space to write my book, because if I just throw it on top of everything else I'm doing, it's not going to happen. So what we need to do, if we really want a goal, is to create space for it. What's going to drop as a result of the new commitment to picking something up? And so we need to really help ourselves achieve our goals by creating space in our life so that we can actually do it. And so I've created time in my week by dropping something in order for this to come in order for me to do the research for my book, in order to start writing my book and start the progress towards it. And so in 2023, coming into 2024, my focus was on quantum health and integrating quantum health into my health regime. And so I dropped the gym as a result of that. And so I created more space. I didn't feel compelled that I needed to fulfill my gym membership because I dropped it. And so I was able to focus on what I wanted to implement around quantum health. And I've been able to meet that goal and fulfill that goal in 2024. And so going into 2025, I've set a goal and I've created space for it. So that it's going to happen, as opposed to just chucking it on top of everything else you're doing. And then you'll think, I just don't have time for it. I'm too busy, and you'll make excuses. So if you want to achieve your goals in 2025, make sure you create space for that goal so that you can actually go about making progress towards that goal. And mine is writing my book on this topic. So I'm going to share insights as I go throughout the year as to what I'm discovering around the research, sharing it on the podcast, and really helping you along your journey. As a bonus for this episode, I've got an ebook covering what I've spoken about today and a whole lot more. It's a very comprehensive ebook. It will be available to you in the show notes. So click on the show notes and you can download the ebook. So it's something I've already written. It's sort of like a prelim to what I'll be writing in a much larger context or a much expanded version in my book. So download the ebook and you'll get a whole lot more information in addition to what I've shared today. And if you've really liked this episode, please share it with others. Please send it out to others and let them know that there's great insights in here as to how they can find their inner beauty, discover more joy, and feel more happy about themselves because they feel it more at one. They've got a more expansive awareness of who they are and acceptance of who they are. And it's really important to have that because then you can grow in self-confidence and self-esteem and focus on your strengths and your superpowers as opposed to focusing on your kryptonite and allowing that kryptonite to expand. And eventually you feel that you're so fragmented and blown up into so many parts that you can't be put back together again. It's very much the Humpty Dumpty scenario, isn't it? So what this episode was all about was bringing parts of Humpty Dumpty back together again and making Humpty Dumpty feel whole. So I hope you really enjoyed the episode. Please share it with others that would also find value in the episode. And remember to download the ebook in the show notes. Just go to the show notes, click on the download, and you'll have that in your hands. And I look forward to sharing more insights with you on discovering inner joy, self-acceptance, self-love in 2025. Podcast disclaimer. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or professional advice and are provided for general information purposes only. All care is taken in the preparation of the information in this podcast. Connected Wellness Proprietary Limited, operating under the brand me&my Health Up, does not make any representations or give any warranties about its accuracy, reliability, completeness, or suitability for any particular purpose. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it are not to be used as a substitute for professional, medical, psychological, psychiatric, or any other mental health care or healthcare in general. me&my Health Up recommends you seek the advice of a doctor or qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Inform your doctor of any changes that you may to your lifestyle and discuss these with your doctor. Do not disregard medical advice or delay visiting a medical professional because of something you hear in this podcast. This podcast has been carefully prepared on the basis of current information. Changes in circumstances after publication may affect the accuracy of this information. To the maximum extent permitted by the law, me&my Health Up disclaims any such representations or warranties to the completeness, accuracy, merchantability, or fitness for purpose of this podcast and will not be liable for any expenses, losses, damages incurred, indirect or consequential damages or costs that may be incurred as a result of the information being inaccurate or incomplete in any way and for any reason. No part of this podcast can be reproduced, redistributed, published, copied, or duplicated in a form without prior permission of me&my Health Up.